Here are the reports you requested. They show a significant increase in Q2 revenue.
Thank you. Let's review the
Week, the lonely CEO said, but she made him believe in love again. The fluorescent white lights cast a sterile glow over the long, polished oak table. At its center, sleek, silver laptops and printed documents lay in rigid formation. On the projection screen at the end of the room, the Hoshimura Group's logo gleamed against a dark background. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was the only sound not stifled by tension. Seated at the head of the table was Elliot Hayes, 33 years old, tall and sharply built in a steel gray suit tailored to perfection. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable. His left hand clutched a silver pen with subtle force, the kind of grip that said he was holding something in. Whether it was irritation or desperation, no one could tell. Across from him sat Mr. Tanaka, the senior executive of Japan's prestigious Hoshimura Group. His voice broke the silence, soft but unmistakably firm. "Mr. Hayes, we respect your achievements, but our brand needs a partner who represents family values, stability, compassion, and long-term vision." The room went still. Several members of the Hayes executive team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them glanced nervously at Elliot. Another tapped a pencil against his notepad. No one spoke. Elliot inhaled quietly through his nose, his jaw tight. His voice, when it came, was deep and calm, practiced. "I assure you, my leadership doesn't depend on my marital status." Tanaka gave a polite smile, but his eyes carried something heavier. Doubt, perhaps sympathy, perhaps, but investors trust a man who knows how to build a home before building an empire. The sentence hit harder than Elliot expected. For a man who had spent his entire adult life constructing empires, corporate, financial, strategic, this was a reminder that the one thing he had never built was a home. He looked down at the table, as if searching for a loophole in the wood grain. In his mind, an old voice echoed, his father's, now long gone. "A man without a family can't be trusted with a legacy." Elliot swallowed hard. He had been here before. Years ago, standing in another room, hearing his fiancée say she could not wait for him to figure out how to be present, how to love beyond logic and spreadsheets. She had walked away, and since then, he had locked that part of himself away, convinced love was a liability he could not afford. But now, the absence of a family, of that image, was threatening the very legacy he had tried so hard to build. He glanced around the room. The board members were whispering among themselves. A man in a dark tie sighed heavily. And Elliot knew. This deal, this $1.2 billion partnership with Hoshimura, was slipping through his fingers. And then, chaos. The conference room doors swung open with an abrupt clatter. "Daddy, Mommy said you'd help us have a yummy dinner." The voice was high, clear, and unmistakably small. Everyone turned in unison. A little girl, no older than 4, came bounding into the room, wearing a puffy pink dress that fluttered as she ran. Her dark golden curls bounced with each step, and a worn-out teddy bear was clutched tightly in her arm. She headed straight for Elliot. Before he could react, the child wrapped her arms around his leg, looking up with bright, sparkling eyes that radiated trust. The room froze. No one moved. Tanaka blinked in confusion. One of the assistants gasped. Someone in the back stifled a laugh. Another chuckled, murmuring something in Japanese. She must be his daughter. Elliot stared down at the child, speechless. He had never seen her before in his life. His body stiffened instinctively, but then, without thinking, his hand moved. It hovered awkwardly in the air for a moment, before lowering gently onto her head. Her curls were softer than anything he had touched in years, and the moment his hand met her hair, something in the room shifted. The boardroom, which had been a battlefield, now felt like a living room, just for a second. A female executive, flustered, dropped her pen. The Japanese delegates leaned forward with interest, whispering again. Elliot could feel every pair of eyes on him, but he could not look away from the child's face. And then, footsteps, rushed, panicked. From the hallway, a woman burst in, breathless. She was in her late 20s, her cheeks flushed, and her blonde hair, pulled back in a low ponytail, had begun to fall loose in soft, chaotic strands around her face. She took one look at the child, and her entire body sagged with relief. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out, eyes wide with embarrassment. She got lost. I didn't mean to interrupt." Riley Moore stood at the doorway, breathless, mortified. Her arms instinctively reached for the little girl in the pink dress, clinging to the leg of the most powerful man in the room. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. She got lost. I didn't mean to interrupt." Elliot Hayes didn't respond at first. He was still crouched slightly, his hand resting awkwardly on the little girl's hair. His eyes, sharp and unreadable moments ago, were now locked on the woman standing before him. Riley's face was flushed. Strands of blonde hair clung to her temples. Her blouse was slightly wrinkled, her jeans faded at the knees. She looked completely out of place in the sterile, high-powered conference room. She wasn't supposed to be here. Just 10 minutes ago, she had been waiting on the ground floor, nervously rehearsing how to introduce herself for a janitorial position. She had left Emma with a coloring book and snacks just a few feet away, but her daughter had a mind of her own. Now here they were, exposed. She reached for Emma's hand again, desperate to retreat. But Elliot stood upright and did something that made everyone pause. He gently pulled Riley's wrist. "Wait," he said, low enough that only she could hear, her brows furrowed in confusion, but Elliot leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Here's $10,000, be my fiancée for a week." The words hit her like a gust of wind. She blinked. "What?" she breathed. His tone remained calm, but his grip on her wrist tightened just slightly. "Just for this deal. No touching, no lies to your daughter, just play along, please." Riley stared at him, frozen. Was this some kind of sick corporate joke? She looked around. Everyone was watching, murmuring, wondering who she was. Emma still clung to the hem of Elliot's tailored pants, completely at ease. Her brain raced. She thought of the call from the hospital last week, the doctor warning that Emma's breathing was weakening. The winter air would only make it worse. They needed a new machine. Soon. It cost $6,000. She had $187.43 in her checking account. And now this man, was offering her more than she made in 6 months for 7 days of pretending? Her eyes dropped to her daughter, whose innocent face was glowing with joy. Riley swallowed hard. She had promised to protect Emma at any cost. She slowly turned back to Elliot. Her voice was low, firm, but tinged with fear. "All right," she said. "Just a week." Elliot gave a subtle nod. Then, without hesitation, he slipped his hand into hers and turned to the room full of board members and international executives. "Gentlemen," he announced, voice smooth and confident, "allow me to introduce my fiancée, Riley." There was a pause, then a ripple of polite clapping. Riley stood beside him, stiff as stone, forcing a faint smile. Her palm was damp in his, but Elliot's hand remained steady, as though this had been planned all along. The Japanese delegates bowed slightly in acknowledgement. Some exchanged looks, curious but intrigued. Still, there was a lingering cloud of doubt in the air, until Emma climbed onto a nearby chair. She stood on her tiptoes, reached out, and wrapped her tiny arms around Elliot's neck from behind. "Daddy smells like pancakes and sunshine," she whispered into his ear. "I like him." Then, gently, she kissed his cheek. Elliot froze. The room collectively inhaled. Riley's heart nearly stopped. Guy Tanaka leaned toward his assistant and murmured something in Japanese, his tone unusually soft. The translator smiled, then repeated it aloud. "A man who is loved by a child that way must have a good soul." There it was, the shift. A warmth spread through the room. Smiles returned. The air, once stiff with skepticism, became light with unspoken acceptance. Papers rustled, pens clicked. The contract, worth $1.2 billion, was signed. The cameras snapped, flashbulbs popped. Riley stood beside Elliot, still gripping his hand, her other arm resting gently on Emma's back. Her smile, though shaky, held. And Elliot, for the first time in a long while, found himself watching not the signatures on the page but the gentle golden wave of Riley's hair beneath the boardroom lights. And he wondered just briefly, what if this wasn't just a role? The invitation had arrived in the form of a folded note left on Riley's pillow. Dinner with Hoshimura. Tonight. Formal. You'll find everything you need in the closet. E. Riley had opened the wardrobe expecting a professional outfit. Instead, she found a dark emerald evening gown. Elegant but understated. The fabric smooth and cool between her fingers. It fit her perfectly, almost unnervingly so. She hesitated before slipping it on. The reflection staring back at her in the mirror didn't look like the tired single mother who swept floors and folded laundry for a living. It was someone who might actually belong in Elliot Hayes' world, if only for a night. The restaurant was a rooftop haven of soft jazz, low lighting, and glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. Riley arrived, gripping Emma's hand, her heels unsteady, her breath shallow. Elliot stood at the entrance, already in place, sharp in a tuxedo. When he turned to see them, his eyes paused longer than usual. "You look appropriate," he said, but there was a flicker of something else in his gaze. She didn't know whether to thank him or be annoyed. Inside, the private dining table was set with fine china, silver cutlery, and crystal glasses. The Hoshimura team was already seated. Elliot pulled out a chair for her, then bent to whisper, almost apologetic. "Mini earpiece in the napkin. Use it. I'll coach you if needed." Riley slid into the seat, heart pounding. She tucked the small earpiece into place. Everything felt like a stage play. Her dress, a costume, her smile an act, her posture rehearsed. The first test came with the first course. She fumbled with the wrong fork, then reached across the table at the wrong time. Her cheeks flushed. But then, Emma. The little girl leaned forward, wide-eyed and utterly unfazed. "Mommy always eats with chopsticks at home," she said cheerfully to Mr. Tanaka. "She's nervous today." The whole table chuckled. Tanaka gave Riley a kind nod, as if to say, "It's okay. We see you." Elliot glanced at Riley, his expression softening. For once, he wasn't whispering instructions. He was simply watching. Halfway through dinner, as conversation flowed and wine glasses refilled, one of the Japanese partners smiled toward Riley. "So, tell us," the man said through the interpreter, "how did Mr. Hayes propose?" Riley froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her mind went blank. Panic rose. But before the silence could stretch, Elliot's hand reached across under the table and gently took hers. "She proposed to me, actually," Elliot said smoothly, "right after Emma made me pancakes for the first time. They were a little burnt, but I guess that's what love tastes like." Laughter erupted around the table. Riley turned toward him, stunned. His hand still held hers, warm and steady beneath the linen. After dinner, they stepped out into the cool night air. Emma's tiny feet were dragging from exhaustion. Without a word, Elliot knelt and retied her untied shoelace, then gently lifted her into his arms. "She's freezing," he murmured. Riley watched him carry her toward the car, her heart tugging in ways she hadn't prepared for. He looked back at her as they reached the curb. "I'm not used to this," he said quietly. "But I'm trying." She paused. The city lights shimmered in his eyes, and for a second, she forgot it was all pretend. "Me too," she replied. That night, back at the mansion, Riley stood before the grand bathroom mirror. She peeled off the lashes, wiped the lipstick, and undid the zipper of the gown. The reflection that stared back at her wasn't a woman in a fairy tale. It was still her. But something had shifted. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Just 1 week." Then, back to reality. But deep in her eyes, something lingered, something softer, something dangerous. A flicker of hope. The mansion was so vast that even silence had room to echo. Riley wandered the upper floor after tucking Emma into bed. The hallway stretched endlessly, each door identical with minimalist brass handles. She had been looking for the linen closet to find an extra blanket. The night had grown colder than expected. She turned the wrong corner and pushed open a door at the end of a quiet hall. It was dim inside. Unlike the rest of the house, which screamed modern opulence, this room felt untouched. A piano stood near the window, its surface dusty, sheet music still open. A soft armchair faced the fireplace, and on the mantel, a small frame lay face down. Riley stepped closer. Curiosity tugged at her. She reached out and flipped the photo frame upright. It was Elliot. Younger, smiling, his arms wrapped around a woman, dark-haired, luminous, clearly once loved. The two of them stood on a beach, mid-laugh, the wind tossing her hair across his face. There was something painfully real about the moment frozen in time. Riley froze when the door clicked shut behind her. Elliot stood there, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, his face turned to stone as he saw what she was holding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Don't touch that." Riley's heart jumped. She set the frame back down slowly, palms up, stepping back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I got lost." Elliot walked past her, picked up the frame, and turned it back down without a glance. "She left," he said simply, his voice cool, like marble. "Said she wanted more than late dinners and canceled plans. Said love doesn't pay bills." He walked to the window and looked out at the garden, the city lights blinking in the distance. "She waited years for me to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. And when I finally proposed, she said it was too late, that I only wanted her when she stopped needing me." There was a pause, long enough for Riley to hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the hall. "That's why I stopped believing in anything that isn't on paper," he continued. "Love, it's unreliable. But contracts, deadlines, terms, they don't walk out when it gets inconvenient." Riley didn't know what to say. She saw the stiff lines in his shoulders, the tightness around his jaw, and understood. Elliot wasn't cold. He was afraid, hurt, still bleeding under all that polish. "I shouldn't have come in," she said gently. "I didn't mean to dig up anything." He finally turned to face her. "You didn't dig it up. It's never really been buried." His voice cracked, just slightly, almost too fast to catch. Riley nodded and stepped back toward the door. As she reached it, he spoke again, quieter this time. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's another performance." She left without another word. That night, as she lay beside Emma in the guest room, Riley wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her tighter than usual. Emma stirred, curling closer. Riley kissed her forehead, whispering, "I won't walk away from you. Ever." But her heart was heavy, not because of her own past, but because of a man down the hall who still lived in his. The morning light filtered gently through the tall windows of the guest suite at Hayes Industries estate. Riley stirred, blinking awake to an unfamiliar scent. Sweet, warm, homemade. Not the usual sterile breakfast of this mansion. Emma was already up, seated at the small round table in her pale pink dress, teddy bear in hand, staring wide-eyed at a stack of pancakes. Riley rubbed her eyes and followed the smell to the kitchen. She expected a chef. Instead, she found Elliot. No suit, no tie, no schedule, just a man at the stove, sleeves rolled up, peering into a pan. "Marcus, did you say this pan is non-stick?" he asked, half to himself, his voice low but calm. He was alone. No assistant, no hovering staff. Just a man trying to cook beyond spreadsheets and deals. On the counter lay a child's crayon drawing, Emma's. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright sun, holding hands. "Daddy, Mommy and me," was written in crooked block letters. Elliot picked it up, looked at it for a second, and set it down with care. The first pancake burned, crisp, blackened edges curling. He sighed and dumped it. The second was raw in the middle. He frowned, adjusted the heat, and tried again. The third came out golden. He placed it on a plate and walked it quietly to the dining table. Riley entered just as Emma squealed. "Mommy, Daddy made pancakes, and they're not black today." Riley froze, a genuine smile spreading across her face. She hadn't smiled like that in a long time. Elliot glanced up and gave a soft shrug. "Still a terrible cook," he said, "but I'm improving." Riley laughed under her breath. Emma clapped and dove in. Syrup shimmered on her plate as she declared, "They're fluffy, like Sunday brunch." Elliot watched them. In that moment, boardrooms and billion-dollar contracts felt a lifetime away. His chest tightened. He whispered, "This wasn't supposed to feel like home." Riley caught his gaze, startled by the warmth in his eyes. There was no audience, no script, just breakfast, just this. Emma tore her pancake in half and offered a piece to Elliot. He accepted it with a small nod. Then, without thinking, he reached across the table and gently placed his hand over Riley's. She paused, but didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet, "for putting up with all this." Riley's heart stumbled. She swallowed. "For Emma," she whispered. They didn't talk about the contract, the lies, or the time limit. They just ate, together. Outside the window, the city moved forward, meetings, traffic, skyscrapers. But in that room, time slowed. Elliot's suit hung untouched on the back of a chair. His phone buzzed, ignored. Emma finished and ran to the bay window. "Look, Daddy, a birdie," she said, grabbing Elliot's hand. He followed, letting her pull him to the glass. They stood together, silent, watching a small sparrow perch on the balcony railing. Riley walked over, stopping just behind them. She looked at the two figures by the window, and for the first time, didn't feel like an outsider. Not a temp. Not a fake. Something real. Elliot's mind spun. He had built towers, managed millions, built a name in steel and numbers. But he had never built this. A quiet morning, shared laughter, peace. His father's words echoed back. A man without a family can't be trusted with a legacy. And they didn't sting like before. They felt like an open question. What is legacy, really? Riley looked at him, her eyes soft. She saw the fear in him, but she also saw the effort. She glanced at Emma's teddy bear on the floor, then at Elliot. In that moment, she understood. This wasn't just an act anymore. Somewhere between burnt pancakes and Emma's innocent praise, Elliot's walls began to fall. The deal still needed closing. The cameras still waited. But for these few stolen minutes, none of that mattered. They were just a family, however imperfect, however brief. The headlines hit like a storm. CEO's fiancée exposed, paid actress or real love. Hayes Industries, billion-dollar deal built on a lie. Someone had leaked the truth, or at least their version of it. Within hours, tabloids, finance blogs, and gossip sites flooded the internet. They claimed Riley Moore was a hired companion, brought in to impersonate Elliot Hayes' fiancée and manipulate Japanese investors. The words fraud, deception, and ethical breach swirled like poison in the company's veins. Riley stood frozen in the hallway of the mansion, her phone shaking in her hand. Emma was coloring on the kitchen floor, blissfully unaware. Elliot burst through the front door, face pale, tie half undone. His phone was pressed to his ear. "Cancel all non-essential meetings," he barked. "I want every PR lead in the conference room in 10. He paused when he saw Riley. Her face said it all. "You knew this could happen," she whispered, voice cracking. "You brought me into this. And I'll fix it," Elliot said firmly, already turning toward the staircase. "You have my word." But Riley wasn't sure his word meant